I dressed up for dal makhani because dal makhani is a dress-up dish. Oh wow, look at that cream, delicious. This recipe will bring restaurant-style dal makhani to your table. Base ingredients come down to the lentil choice. So we're using black urad dal, and urad dal is a really hard, round dal, and we use it whole. And that's because dal makhani actually maintains quite a little bit of form. It doesn't become a very liquid, runny, homogeneous kind of a dal. So you can see here, this has been soaked overnight. The water was up to here and it's absorbed all of it. So it takes in a lot, and it's split a fraction. So you can see like the actual kind of pea. Along with the black urad dal, we're using rajma, red kidney bean. This is from Jammu. This is the rajma to end all rajmas. So what we're gonna do, start with the first process, which is the pressure cooker. All right, so this is going in along with the rajma, which I will rinse. I want this dish to be well salted at this point. So I'm going to say 2 teaspoons of salt and then enough water to cover to allow to pressure cook and soften, but not to drown. So I do this visually. It's just covering, and then when I move it through, it moves quite freely, but it's not too loose either. There's not so much water that I'm drowning anything in there, just a fraction more. I'm gonna put this onto pressure cook. I'm gonna hear 2 whistles. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit, and then it's gonna take around 10 minutes. So while the dal's pressure cooking, I'm just going to prepare 2 to 3 small onions, minced, and 2 tablespoons each of minced garlic and minced ginger, and that is the spice to start the second phase of the dal makhani. So while the pressure cooker was doing its thing, we took it to 10 whistles, 10 minutes on low. I minced the garlic and ginger paste. And then mince some onion as well. Okay, so I force release the pressure cooker with the fork. If you're uncomfortable doing that, you can put it in the sink and run it over cold water. So essentially what we're looking for, we've achieved, which is the urad dal should be cooked and tender, but it still will hold its form. It's beautifully salted and it's not too firm, but we do need to mash it before we begin the next stage of the cooking process, just to break it down a bit more. You don't have to be too rigorous about it. I mean, obviously there's still, dal makhani is a dal with texture. That's about it. You just want there to be a little less individuation between the lentil grains. So I'm just going to move this to the side for a moment. And we're starting the second phase. So this is the finishing part of the cook. Okay, so we're starting with quite a lot of ghee. So along with the ghee, we're using butter on a high heat. You can see it's starting to foam nicely. And we're going to add the onion, ginger and garlic at this point because we don't want to caramelize the wet aromatics. We just want them to be not raw and a little translucent. This is your garlic and ginger paste. One of the tips is you'll smell when they're no longer raw. the astringent, sulfuric, eye-watering quality of the onion becomes diminished, and there's a sweetness and a little bit of warmth. Okay, so we are adding into this a half a cup of tomato paste. So tomato paste is part of what gives dal makhani its colour, but also its really rich body as well. Again, we're going to cook this off until it's no longer raw, just 1 or 2 minutes. The masala is added at this point. And this masala, as I was explaining earlier, is really nominal. So we're dealing with a little more salt, around 2 teaspoons. Depending on the type of salt used, this is actually quite a strong salt, so I'm using a little less. And then a teaspoon of garam masala and a teaspoon of Kashmiri chili. Kashmiri chili is used for its colour more than its heat. Incredible red vermilion hue. And you can see that's starting to become quite rich. So in terms of tips for making the perfect dal makhani, you really do want to have the lentils soaked overnight and the rajma red kidney beans soaked overnight, and to make sure that that pressure cook, that initial pressure cook, is done really well. If you're unsure, open the pressure cooker and check halfway through and see where you're at before you keep going. So at this point we're adding the lentils back in. Look at all that delicious oil. Nah, amazing. We're going to add about 1.5 cups of water. Now the name for the dish dal makhani comes from the use of butter. Makhan is butter in Hindi, and dal obviously being lentil. The origin of the dish is one of those disputed cases where there is a restaurant called Daryaganj in Delhi, and they proclaim themselves the inventors of both butter chicken and dal makhani. But you know, there's others that protest that too, so I'm not sure. I feel like it's an eternal question that could never get correctly answered. But you see, just that little addition of water, suddenly it's starting to look like the dish that you're used to seeing on your Indian restaurant table. The cooking process with water can go up to 40 minutes. The longer you cook, the creamier the dal. What I will say is that if you're cooking over 40 minutes, you do have to keep adding above and beyond that initial 1.5 cups of water that we've added. You just keep adding water 1/3 cup at a time. This is almost perfect. The dal won't break down much more than this, but what will happen is through the addition of the water and the stirring, we're creating further texture in the actual in the actual body of the dal, and creation of texture in the body of produce allows the masala to express in a more complex way, and in that way a dish that uses very little variation in spice can suddenly feel much more opulent. It is a little bit of a cheat to create more elegant flavour without much more effort. It's just time. Time has a taste of its own, and generally the taste of time is pretty delicious. I'm going to taste this. We will add more butter and cream just before serving. It's very rich. And the garlic and the ginger is very forward, so I am going to cook it out a little more. The water and the cooking over time helps to balance out the intensity of the garlic, onion and ginger. As will the cream and butter at the end. Turn it down a fraction. So you can see this is too loose. So now we just have to cook it out a little. It should almost stick to the back of your spoon when you put it in there. Yeah, it's, as it cooks, the urad lentil begins to occupy more of the aromatic space, and it becomes less gingery, less garlicky, and more creamy. You can see that consistency. It's that combination of urad dal holding its structure and then the rajma breaking down around it and creating some of that sort of delicious thickness. So I'm going to finish this with some more butter and some cream. Oh wow, look at that cream, delicious. So it rounds off the masala, and it's a lot of what gives dal makhani that very unctuous feel in the mouth, that real too muchness, like velvety texture. Okay, so we're going to move this across to serve. I like my dal makhani because it's not bland. It still has a little bit of texture and shape in there. I like to serve dal makhani with methi flatbread paratha. That's my favourite thing to eat. Methi paratha and dal makhani is a pretty clever combination.